Welcome to the Art of Adventure podcast. This is episode 200. This is a huge milestone for me, and I've put together an interesting episode, interesting format called a radio hour. And I wanted to celebrate some of the very best adventure stories that we've collected over the years of the Art of Adventure. So we've got several different interview segments appearing in this radio hour from some of our most adventurous guests. We've got Dave Cornthwaite talking about Expedition 1000, which is his quest to do 25 journeys of 1,000 miles or more, each with a different type of non-motorized transportation. We've got Sean Conway talking about swimming the length of Great Britain and getting stung in the face with jellyfish and experiencing beautiful phosphorescence swimming at night. We have Jano Lenin, who walked across the Himalayas and found himself at the source of the Ganges River at sunset. We're going to hear from Anne-Laure Carruth talking about her trip to circumnavigate the Mediterranean in a Land Rover. We hear from the most traveled man in the world about how he fought off a mountain lion in the wilderness. We're going to hear from adventure writer Carl Hoffman about how his bus broke down in a tribal region of Afghanistan with a not friendly, dangerous warlord. And base jumper and extreme athlete Jeff Shapiro talking about what it was like the first time he jumped off a cliff to do wingsuit diving.
When I go on a reporting trip, I don't really have any needs other than the need to get information. I have an ultimate goal, which is to, find whatever treasure I'm looking for. But, the way to do that, like in a place like Asmat, I don't say, I'm tired, I want to go to bed, or I'm hungry, or I don't like that food, or do you have any salt for that piece of sago that has no flavor, or I'm uncomfortable in that bathroom, or, anything. I don't have any needs. I'm just with people, and whatever they want to do is good with me. In Afghanistan, I took the bus across northern Afghanistan in 2009 for Lunatic Express, and that, I had local people who told me whether it was safe, they thought it was safe or not, and it was determined that it was, but the bus broke down once it just stopped for a little while, and everybody got up. It was January, and it was right after Christmas, and everyone, it was a very desolate place. Afghanistan could look pretty desolate in the winter. It's brown. It's like the brownest place in the whole world. And the bus stopped, and we were just like in the middle of nowhere, kind of. And everybody got up, like to go outside and stretch their legs and pee and stuff. And I got up too, and the guy's next to me, so it was like, no, you can't go out. I'm like, why not? And he's like, because this is a really bad area. This is, Hektamar. This is Hektamar's area. And, he was a well-known, not really Taliban, but someone who had been very hostile to the United States for a long time. And, I started getting nervous because in a place like Afghanistan, it's movement that can keep you alive. And, the longer you're in a place, then the more your presence can become known, and
people talk.
Bad guys. Everyone around you, presumably is a good guy, but somewhere out there is a bad guy. You're quite valuable, as a Westerner. So someone tips somebody off about you, they can probably make some money.
Yeah.
So had we been stuck there, I started thinking, what if we're stuck here for 24 hours or something? I got to go into town, and I was wearing a shalwar kameez, and I hadn't shaved, and I had a hat on.
So you didn't look super
no,
like
people
a sore thumb?
People were talking to me in, Urdu and, whatever. They thought I was a local. A lot of Afghans have green eyes too, and I had a pretty heavy tan on at the time. So, nobody, but the minute you really talked, quite obvious. I mean, there's no way for me to pass. I mean, I felt like I was a clown, but that I was in a costume. But people would just come up to me and start talking. So I guess it kind of worked. But had we been stuck there, I thought, oh shit, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna, But then, like 10 minutes later, everybody pushed the bus, and the bus roared to life and got on. We off we went.
So for the last 10 years, I've been doing a few different things, but I left my job as a graphic designer. I was in Swansea, South Wales, and utterly miserable, hiding my real life away by playing PlayStation 10 hours a day and growing my hair and my beard longer and longer. And yeah, my 25th birthday, I just realized my cat was about to have a much better day than I was. And that didn't seem satisfactory, considering I'm a human with lots of potential. So I decided to see who I could be and quit my job and skateboarded the length of Britain and then across Australia, and came up with a project called Expedition 1000. And the idea was to basically just keep focused by doing interesting stuff and challenging myself constantly, which you don't do, by the way, when you're playing PlayStation 10 hours a day in South Wales. So Expedition 1000 is 25 different journeys of 1,000 miles or more, and each one uses a different form of non-motorized transport. So over the last 9 years now, I've completed 11 of them. So I've traveled over 20,000 miles under my own steam, and I'm not even halfway through this damn project. But it's awesome. It just keeps me really focused. And more often than not, in between each one, I do a little speaking tour now, or I write a book and just come up with lots of little projects. Basically, when you go to the pub with a mate and you come up with the most stupid ideas, and then you normally wake up the next morning hungover and think, that was ridiculous, I'm never going to do that. Yeah. That's my life. I just do it.
Wow.
And it doesn't need beer anymore to come up with the projects.
Swimming at night is a little spooky.
The first time I did it, it was not fun, to be honest, because there's loads of jellyfish out as well at the same time. So I just kept getting stung in the face by jellyfish, and they're the big ones, man. They're like the size of footballs with 3-meter tentacles. They're called lion's mane jellyfish. But I just had to do it. You had to do it. There's some. If I didn't swim like night sessions, I wouldn't complete the swim. And, once you've come to terms with that, you just got to deal with it. It's either that or quit, really. It was freaky. Because it's just so dark, especially when there's no moon or anything. And I've got, earplugs in, so I can't really hear much. So I'm in my own little weird headspace. And I have a wild imagination. And I just kept thinking of all the creepy crawlies lurking beneath me.
I know, right? I've done some night scuba diving, and you have a beam of light, and then things just swim into your beam of light, and you're like, how big is this thing going to be?
Exactly.
Wow.
Never mind. That's a vibe.
You were talking in one of your videos about the experience with the phosphorescence, and that's got to be such a amazing phenomenon to experience.
Yeah, and it was like you see in the movies, like in The Beach when Leonardo DiCaprio is playing in the water, or in Life of Pi when the whale comes out of the water. It was almost like that. I'd just put my hand in the water and open it, and there'd be an explosion of light, or like a foot around my hand, and I'd look down and I'd kick my feet, and there would just be like thousands and millions of little phosphorescence everywhere. But then, then my wild imagination kicked in, and I just kept swimming, thinking, if I see a streak of phosphorescence like dart underneath me, 50 meters below, I'm gonna lose my bowels. It's not gonna end well for my wetsuit there. So, yeah. So as amazing as it was, I just pictured the scene of seeing a trail of phosphorescence below me and wondering what it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd always been fascinated with flight for one reason or another, and I think I've thought about this quite a bit. I think that flying represents a level of freedom that is feels unattainable for people, and to me, and this certainly isn't to take away from anyone else's passion or experience, but being in an airplane feels like being in a car. It's like so the way I dreamed of flying was as I saw it actually flying like a bird. I think that I've always sort of been fascinated by that and wanted to chase that experience. And like I said before, what ends up happening is the result of that is that the essence of the activity, similar to surfing or any other thing that people are into, is to be in the present, to live in the moment. And wingsuit base jumping is one of those activities that for me, you can't do it and not be in the moment. I mean, literally, my brain can't compute fast enough to include anything other than the moment when I'm doing that activity. And that's a really, really, really special place to be. It's not to make everything else go away. It's to sort of get into this place where you can't predict what is going to happen. You can think you can sort of expect and hope to expect, but the reality is once you jump off the cliff, there's no such thing as brakes, and you can only react to what's in front of you. And I liken it to surfing because similar, when you catch a wave, you can expect to pop up and you can expect to trim out and you can expect to be on a wave, but you can't ever have realistic expectations as to what the experience will be like because you're only reacting to the wave that's in front of you as it comes. So as a result, when you kick off that wave and you paddle back out into the lineup, it's not the wave that you're trying to recreate, it's the feeling. And a wingsuit base jump for me is that. People ask me all the time, how long does it last? Most of the time, I have no idea. Honestly, the amount of time, whether it's 20 seconds or 2 minutes, it's just completely irrelevant. And the reason is because time, being relative, just doesn't matter. It's just such an intense experience and such a free feeling that you're living every second as an entire lifetime. So for me, I also just have a deep-seated love for the mountains. Often wingsuit base jumps these days for me are a solo hike in the mountains. Just from the beginning, walk you through it when I wake up at my home and my wife and kiddo are asleep and I'm drinking coffee, grabbing my rig and my wingsuit and heading out the door while it's still dark out. It's a really satisfying feeling to know that you're one way or another, I'm going to have a memorable experience, whether I walk down or jump or not. And that in itself is already pretty special. And drive into the mountains, hike up for hours, watch the sun crack the horizon, usually over, another mountain range. Those moments alone where you can think and get into the now and to really appreciate where you're at and what you have, that sort of prepares me for the jump and to be able to gather the most from it. And, I get to the exit and during that whole hike, I'm sort of going through all of this process, the process that everybody feels, how I deal with fear, how I deal with doubt, how I deal with, the linear and intuitive thoughts that are required to decide whether or not the jump is appropriate for me. I'm looking at the conditions, I'm looking at birds, I'm looking at the wind in the trees. I'm looking down, hopefully if I can see it at the bottom, and trying to sort of go through that process so that when I get to the exit, that decision whether or not to jump is made. And on the mornings that I'm lucky enough where everything seems to feel right and fit, it's quiet. I'm up on this perch on the top of a big wall in the mountains, totally by myself, nobody around. Taking the wingsuit out and going through that, sort of mantra of checking my gear and doing what I need to ensure that I've done all the steps, that I've earned the right to make the jump, and that I feel like it's an appropriate decision to make. And after I'm all suited up, it's hard to describe. I usually take some deep breaths and look out at the horizon and look around and appreciate where I'm at. When the timing feels right, the decision has already been made. So there's no reason to wait around. There's no reason to be nervous. There's no reason to be scared. Yeah, when you push off, I've flown other things, hang gliders, paragliders, flying a wingsuit's really special because yes, there's speed, but it's not this intense. I mean, it is intense, but it's not this adrenaline rush that everybody thinks that it is. The second I jump off the cliff, I know that, first of all, I know the wingsuit's going to work. Otherwise, I wouldn't be jumping. So that trust allows me to enter this experience with a confidence that allows me to relax. So, as soon as the suit starts flying, or I start flying the suit and start to separate from the cliff a little bit, and in a wingsuit, airspeed equals potential for lift and the ability to control the suit. So it's usually about between 2 and 3 seconds before I feel the suit powered up enough to be able to control it. And those, that the exit, the actual jump, that part of it is pretty important because you are exposing surface area to the conditions without enough airspeed to control the suit fully. So you have to do that part right. And I'm very focused, obviously, during that part. But once I start flying, I just feel completely free and free of time, free of any other thought. And, you're flying with your arms. You're not flying in something, you're flying. I was fascinated with that feeling from dreams as a kid, and a wingsuit, more than probably any other type of flying, allows me to fly like those dreams, like where you're flying. and then the moment that I decide to deploy my parachute, that kind of cracks me back into reality. It's funny. I go from almost a one state of consciousness to another. And because I've flown so many other things, similar paragliders and hang gliders, as soon as I'm under a clean canopy, I feel sort of at home and relaxed and more in my, like, a normal conscious mind, the mind that I'm in now. You're still on the sharp end and you still have to pilot your parachute to the ground safely. And in Montana, that can be pretty sporty. The places that I land don't allow a whole lot of room for error. But once you're on the ground, or once I'm on the ground, it's such a strange feeling. I have so many memories of this happening where the canopy is made of a very lightweight material. And that material, there's usually not a whole lot of wind on the ground. So when I land, the canopy will slowly drape into the sticks and drop, and everything is quiet. And I'm standing there sort of, in just amazed, in awe of what I just was able to experience. The first time I stood at the top of a cliff with a parachute on, even after jumping off of bridges, even after jumping off of, out of airplanes, that I was prepared. And that activity in particular is unique because, in climbing, you work your way up, right? You do these things in small steps, but it's all similar. Whereas in a jump, you're basically committed 100% when you jump. And essentially you have to deploy your parachute to save your life. So mentally, and I'm bringing myself back to that first time that I jumped off of a cliff, and this is without a wingsuit. Mentally or physically, I'm thinking, no, mentally, I'm thinking that, hey, I'm trained. I've made the decision. The conditions are appropriate. I know that my gear works. I've triple checked it. I know the landing zone. I know the approach that I'm going to use. I know the conditions down there. I know the conditions up here. All of these things are going through my mind, and I feel okay about the decision. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing 3 feet from the edge of the cliff wearing the parachute. But my body, physically, your brain is saying, do not jump off this cliff. Like, why would you do that? Don't do that. It just means death, right? And I think that is just a genetic, consequence of being pretty fragile over the eons as humans have developed. And that, I think, it's kind of cool to talk about in itself, because when you do to make the decision to jump and you have this experience, I think what I was doing was essentially telling myself that what I thought was impossible was actually possible. And that carries over to other things in life. And that's really an interesting facet of it. If, in other words, if you can do that, well, you can do anything. Why couldn't you dream up a massive adventure and make it happen? I also think that what I defined before as a result, being that you discover what's important and what's trivial, I think that part of it is really important too, because when you have that level of genetic fear, and you do it anyways based on your training, and then you successfully complete the task. I think that discovering that what's important and what's trivial takes on a completely different level of meaning. I can very easily open my mouth and say, family's important and traffic is trivial. But when you feel it, that can come, I think, it comes in a different form when, for one reason or another, I've sort of discovered the baselines in life, and I think mortality is one of them.
And I'd been searching for water for a long time. And because my stream I was drinking out of had kind of gone down to mud, and I had just a little bit of mud water left to drink. And I was sick from drinking that water. And I've been hiking for days looking for an alternate supply of water. And finally, far up on the mountainside, I noticed the tracks of an elk. And I thought, ooh, there must be water here. So I was following its tracks, and I didn't find the elk, but I found where it had been drinking. And there was a split in the rock and some water coming out, and then it went back down into the rock. But I was really, really high up in the alpine zone. And by the time I found this water and I had a drink, it was time to go back, and it was nighttime. And it's extremely steep mountain as well, steeper than a ski hill. And there's cliffs on it, and areas with thorn trees and things like that. And now I'm hiking at night through that. And luckily I used to practice night hiking a lot, because I was able to do it. But you really got to look for a glimmer of moonlight to try to guess where trees are, especially guess where cliffs are. But while I was making my way down, which would have been about an hour and a half hike, I passed through a gully, and then I heard a noise behind me. And I was thinking, ooh, is it a bear or a mountain lion? Or perhaps just a deer? And so I stopped to test it, and it took 1 footstep, and then 2 footsteps, and then it stopped as well. And I thought, oh no, it's a mountain lion. And I knew which one it was too, because it's one that had come to harass me. I think it was about a month before that. I'd been wearing a backpack, not my backpack that I have now, but a smaller one. And I'd taken it off so I could drink some water out of a stream. And when I'd done that, it had come in and slashed the backpack with its claws, and then ran off. And the claws had opened up through the shoulder strap. It had opened up a slice all the way through that you could open up like a mouth, and had further damage on each side. So it had really sharp claws. They honed them on the rocks, and they were really quite sharp. They kill about a deer a week.
Wow.
They're quite efficient killers. So I knew it was this one. And it was following me. And now I thought, oh no, I don't have any kind of weapon. And if it knows that I'm blind, it's going to attack. So what I would do is, while I'm walking through the darkness, I can just barely hear it following and stalking, maybe about 30 feet behind me. And I would wait till it made a mistake, like it might have snapped a twig, or it brushed some leaves off something. And then I would turn around and stare to exactly where the sound was coming from. So I was trying to give it the misapprehension that I was able to see it. Yeah, and it worked, because it didn't make the final attack, which would have killed me. But I had to walk along, and if I made a single mistake, like a slipping or falling off a cliff or even a small rise, if I'd stumbled, it would have instantly attacked. So I never minded my feet more than in that moment, because any small misstep would result in death.
Oh my gosh.
And I kept walking down, and I missed my camp. But then I noticed a clearing that I'd been in before with a girlfriend who come up to visit me a couple months before. And it had an unusual tree that came up and made a J, and then continued up. So I noticed this tree against the moonlight, and I knew where I was. And I went back to camp, and I thought, okay, that's the end of the mountain line. And it'll smell, this is my camp, it'll go away. But no, it followed me all the way up, and it was right there. It's starting to get now a little bit into morning, and I could actually see it. And it was coming quite close. And I had no weapons except for I could choose between a hatchet and a stick. And I went with the stick because it was longer. So I kept the hatchet close, but I took this hawthorn stick I'd been using to hold up the piece of plastic I was sleeping under. So I didn't have a tent. I would just sleep open to the wild with a piece of plastic above me. And when it would come in, it started coming in to attack, but it would just flatten its ears and then just rush at me. And it wasn't even making any noise. And I would swing, but I could see it was trying to get inside of my swing. So I'd swing and try to pivot and then try to swing again. And I kept doing this. It was very annoying.
Wow. That is fascinating. That's amazing.
Yeah. Eventually I got it to back off. I think it knew that I was feeling quite weak because of lack of water or drinking dirty water. I was quite stressed as a result, so that might have been part of the reason. And also I was up in its territory in the darkness, and it sort of brought it down to me.
Yeah. Wow.
But I had to Yeah, I had to make a note to my girlfriend. It's the only time I had to do this. I made a note for my girlfriend. She was going to come up and see how I was. And I said, if you can't find me, I've been eaten by a mountain lion, so don't hang around. It's too dangerous.
Oh my gosh.
And I stuck that to a tree. Like there was a big ponderosa pine, and I stuck that to the tree where I thought it wouldn't get blown away. But luckily, it tried to annoy me for maybe about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. But then it backed off mostly, and it stayed more in the distance. But still, there's no way I could sleep that night. I just sat there looking at it. But it's almost the same with these police, because they constantly harass you in certain countries. And especially anything near the DRC, and there's other ones in Asia, they do the same. And they're looking for fear in your eyes. And if they see it, they press further. And you end up having to pay enormous bribes.
If you have fear, is there anything you can do? Or did you just have no fear?
I would try to have no fear. Sometimes it got a bit scary, but I would try to have no fear. I mean, I felt a bit scared once in not the DRC, but the Republic of Congo next door. And I'd arrived in a town, and there was a big fight going on in the police station. So the policemen were there beating each other bloody. It's like blood was squirting out of their faces. They slam each other with their fists. And I was trying to listen into the French to see what they're fighting about. They were fighting about which branch of the police would be allowed to try to steal from me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I thought, these guys are very serious. So I tried to head that off by, I found a guy who seemed quite important, and I managed to slip him $10, and I got out of that. But I think I was lucky in that situation that when I first arrived, I made a few allies, because I noticed in that part of Africa, if you can, you try to work the people, not the system so much. So when I first arrived in town, I noticed some policemen who were, maybe not the most important policemen, but there they were. And I went right over and bought them a beer each and sat down and talked to them. So what I was looking for is something like coffee tables are a good example. So I'd noticed that they were slicing down coffee plantations in Java. And I was asking some locals, like, why are you doing that? And they said the trees get too big sometimes. They're too old, they're too big. You just cut them down. I said, what do you do with the wood? And they said, well, it's a firewood. And essentially that means it costs nothing. And I thought, it's a very interesting hardwood, and plus it's a coffee wood. And so I would buy up this coffee wood, and I was thinking to make it into coffee tables. And just with the idea that when I was going to sell them, that I could say it's not just a coffee table, it's a coffee table. So it's really, and yet they work perfectly. So imagine I get them to make some samples. That takes a couple weeks. So for a couple weeks, I'm not really traveling. Let's say I think I got them made in Bali. So I'm just hanging out in Bali for a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. Then I say, okay, good. I want 2,000 of these, 5,000 of this, 4,000 of this, whatever I might be ordering. And then once they, I pay like 10% down for that, then I can just travel. So I would travel somewhere nearby, like Vietnam or Borneo or somewhere. And then I'd come back and see how it's going. And usually they have it done. And I'd say, okay, put it in containers. I pay off the rest of the money. And then now it's being shipped. So it'd be going out to Singapore and then across the ocean to Seattle or wherever I was sending it. And so while that's happening, I could travel further afield. So I might go to Nepal or, who knows, China or somewhere like that. And sometimes even to Africa. And then when I knew the container was about to arrive, I'd zip back. And in the case of the coffee tables, you just like, boom, sold. So I just rent a truck, put a sample of each, and I'd drive around to anyone who I thought might be able to buy a lot of these things. And they'd all say, like, give me 400, give me 500. And I'm there for a few weeks, and it's sold.
But, a couple of days later, I was in my hotel room in Kathmandu, and I was reading through a section of the book where I reached the source of the Ganges. And, the Ganges, it's an incredible river. I mentioned earlier in relation to River Trilogy, it is the most sacred river in Hinduism, but it's also the river that provides sustenance for 500 million people on the Gangetic Plain. So it also is this multi-layered fluvial piece of geography. It's an incredible place. And where the river actually originates is at about 4,500 meters up in the Himalayas. And the river actually actually emanates from the base of a glacier, the Gangotri Glacier, this place called Gaumuk. And Gaumuk in Sanskrit means cow's mouth. So the river actually starts from the mouth of the most sacred animal in Hinduism. So this is a landscape completely steeped in Hindu mythology. And I remember arriving there, and I was arriving just as the sun was setting. And this was in November. So pilgrimage season in India goes from about May until the start of October. And after that, really no pilgrims come. During pilgrimage season in Gangotri, there can be tens of thousands of people there. But because it was going into winter, there was nobody there. I was the only person at the source of the most important river in the entire country. And I got there just as the sun was setting. And so the sky behind the glacier where the river starts from was the color of coral or rubies. And the face of the glacier, as you would know, Derek, glacial ice is a turquoise color.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, turquoise and coral. That really resonated for me, because turquoise and coral are the two protective stones that every Tibetan child receives when they're born, and they wear them around their necks for the rest of their lives. So it was almost as if I was moving into this landscape of protection. And I got so excited about this that I threw off my backpack and I started running up the glacial moraine, boulder to boulder, so that I could get to the source of the river before the sun actually set. And I got there just as the sun was slipping behind these ice peaks, these ruby-colored ice peaks. And I was just exhausted, physically and mentally exhausted. And so I dropped down onto this gray, sandy beach. And I just wanted to still my breath and just be at that place. And so I was breathing gently, and off on my left was this turquoise ice cave, this cavern out of which this stream was coming. Actually, it was more than a stream. It was a real creek, and right in front of me was the infant Ganga. I felt this heat rising up my spine, and then I realized that I was crying. I'd always thought that welling up of emotion was about being at the source of that incredible piece of geography, about being there at the river that creates sustenance and survival for hundreds of millions of people.
Basically, I'd just come back from painting in Jordan, and Lucy is a friend of mine. We've known each other since we were 10 years old, and she just come back from traveling around the world. And we met up randomly, and I'd been trying to find a way to get paid to go painting in cool countries. And so I'd come across this grant called the Go Beyond Grant, and it's run by the Royal Geographical Society and Land Rover. And so every year they offer £30,000 and a brand new Land Rover to do an interesting geographical journey. So that weekend we met up for the first time in years, and I just mentioned this thing. It's like, yeah, how cool would it be? And I think she just started literally a job, that week, and we just started talking and thought, well, how hard can it be? It's only 250 words to apply for, with some cool idea. So why don't we just think of something and see what happens? So from that quite flippant start, we started thinking about places we'd like to go. And so Lucy traveled to Syria in the past. I'd been to Jordan, but we didn't really know much about North Africa and other countries such as Lebanon. So we were just talking about it. Well, if we had Land Rover, the plan or the bursary said you had to start and end in the UK. So then we started thinking, well, actually, that it's such an interesting part of the world post-Arab Spring that nobody really knows about, and there's no independent travellers going there at the moment. So we thought, well, why don't we drive anti-clockwise and go travel through every country bordering the Med? And basically the whole kind of reason we wanted to do it was because we wanted to tell positive stories. We wanted to tell the everyday lives of people that we met along the way. So it wasn't about going to war zones and trying to be on the front line. It was literally just about meeting normal people and just coming home and telling a positive story of that region to sit alongside the more negative mainstream media. Before we left, everyone was telling us that everywhere, all the countries we're going to go to were super dangerous, that people were nasty, that we were going to get killed or raped or murdered or whatever. And that happened in the UK and in France as we travelled down. But then it also happened in Morocco. People were saying to us, "Oh my God, you're going to Algeria, you're crazy. They're awful people there. They're terrorists. They're going to butcher you to pieces." And then we end up in Algeria, and they're the kindest people we'd ever met. And they were saying, "Welcome to Algeria." And we got given gifts left, right, and centre, and taken into people's houses and adopted. And so that kept going along from one country to another, from one region to another, from one town to another. People say, "Oh my God, you've just come from that place? That's crazy. They're awful people there." And so what we realized is that there's this innate fear of the unknown as a kind of human condition. If we don't know something, we automatically have this fear of it. And what we hope is that, is there any way that our project, or the way we speak about our project, or moving forward in what we do in the future, whatever that is to hopefully shift that perception of fear to a sense of curiosity instead. And almost, I don't know anything about Algeria, but maybe they're not all monsters there, but maybe I don't know anything about it. Maybe I should find out more about it, or maybe I want to go on holiday there and actually experience it for myself.
There you have it. That is an Adventure Radio Hour. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of the best adventure stories from the Art of Adventure. And I want to acknowledge you, the listener, for joining me for so many interviews and so many episodes. 200. It's so exciting. All of a sudden it's here. We've been doing this show for 4 years, and 200 has arrived. When I started, my goal was to do 300 episodes. That means we're 2/3 of the way there. Who knows if I'll stop, but that is the goal. So you've got another 100 episodes to look forward to. And if you've been listening to the show for a while and you haven't subscribed in iTunes or left us a review, that can really help the show. So I would love for you to take a few minutes and go to iTunes and just leave a comment about this episode or one of your favorite interviews, one of your favorite episodes, and let me know what you learned. And of course, you can always find the show notes over at DerekLoudermilk.com. And we love guest recommendations. So you can reach out via email, Twitter, Instagram. Those are all great ways. I've got a few guest recommendations coming in recently, so people are doing that. Additionally, if you have a topic that you would like to see featured on the show, it's very helpful, actually, for me to find guests that can be experts on a particular topic. If that's requested by you guys, we'll do our best to make an episode to serve you. That's all for today's episode. Keep your eye out on DerekLoudermilk.com for compilations in the future and best of listing of the most popular Art of Adventure episodes. Thanks so much for listening. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.